Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Varadari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Varadari Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Varadari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Varadari Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Srila Prabhupada ki Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai Nitai Gaura Premanande. Reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, Volume 6, Uniting Two Worlds, chapter is entitled, I have done my part. Toward the end of July, Prabhupada's health seemed to be worsening again, and again he mentioned that the end might come at any moment. Tamal Krishna had been acting as Srila Prabhupada's personal secretary for 6 continuous months, and he had become Prabhupada's eyes and ears and his spokesman, especially in dealing with ISKCON management. And he had also become a personal confidant, assisting Srila Prabhupada in his transcendental moods. As a sincere servant, he now began suggesting a different remedy. Srila Prabhupada had recently been feeling and expressing intense devotion towards his disciples in their preaching. Taking this as a cue, Tamal Krishna suggested that if Prabhupada could travel to the West and be with his disciples there, he would find new life. But if I die, said Prabhupada, I want to do so in Vrindavan. Tamal Krishna replied that Srila Prabhupada should not think of dying. If he would go on a tour of the West, see the devotees there, take prasada made from food grown on the ISKCON farms, then certainly he would respond to such devotion and regain his appetite and strength. Krishna pointed out that when Srila Prabhupada had been feeling like this in May and the DBC had come, he had responded to their reciprocation of love by increasing his own desire to live. One thing you can do, said Srila Prabhupada, in your daily routine, you can pray to Krishna. If you want him to stay, please cure him, and if not, please take him away. We are fully surrendered to you. Now it depends on your desire to keep him alive or let him leave this world. Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 17. Chapter is entitled The Descent of the River Ganges. Just read a little introduction to the chapter. The 17th chapter describes the origin of the Ganges River and how it flows in and around Ilavrita Varsha. There is also a description of the prayers Lord Shiva offers to Lord Sankarshan, part of the quadruple expansions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Vishnu once approached Bali Maharaj while the king was performing a sacrifice. The Lord appeared before him as Trivikram or Vamana and begged alms from the king in the form of the 3 steps of land. With 2 steps, Lord Vamana covered all 3 planetary systems and pierced the covering of the universe with the toes of his left foot. A few drops of water from the causal ocean leaked through this hole and fell on the head of Lord Shiva, where they remained for 1,000 millenniums. These drops of water are the sacred Ganges River. It first flows onto the heavenly planets, which are located on the soles of Lord Vishnu's feet. The Ganges River is known by many names such as Bhagirati and the Jahnavi. It purifies Dhruvaloka and other planets of the 7 sages because both Dhruva and the sages have no other desire than to serve the Lord's lotus feet. The Ganges River, emanating from the lotus feet of the Lord, inundates the heavenly planets, especially the moon, and then flows through Brahmapuri atop Mount Meru. Shishikodayatai Mahaprabhu Ki Jai. Here the river divides into 4 branches known as Sita, Alakananda, Chakshu, and Badra, which then flow down to the ocean of salt water. The branch known as Sita flows through Shikara Parvata and Gandhamadana Parvata and then flows down to Bhadrashva Varsha, where it mixes with the ocean of salt water in the west. The Chakshu branch flows through Malayavangiri and after reaching Ketumala Varsha mixes with the ocean of salt water in the west. The branch known as Bhadra flows onto Mount Meru, Mount Kumuda, and the Nila, Shveta, and Shringavan mountains before it reaches Kurudesh, where it flows into the ocean of salt water in the north. And Alakananda branch flows through Brahmalaya, crosses over many mountains, including Hemakuta and Himakuta, and then reaches Bharatvarsha, where it flows into the southern side of the ocean of salt water. Many other rivers and their branches flow through the 9 Varshas. The tract of land known as Bharatvarsha is the field of activities, and the other 8 Varshas are for persons who are meant to enjoy heavenly comfort. In each of these 8 beautiful provinces, the celestial denizens enjoy various standards of material comfort and pleasure. A different incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead distributes His mercy in each of the 9 Varshas of Jambudvip. In the Ilavrita Varsha, Lord Shiva is the only male. There he lives with his wife Bhavani, who is attended by many maidservants. If any other male enters that province, Bhavani curses him to become a woman. Lord Shiva worships Lord Sankarshan by offering various prayers, one of which is as follows: My dear Lord, please liberate all your devotees from material life and bind all the non-devotees to the material world. Without your mercy, no one can be released from the bondage of material existence. So text 1. I just do this myself. Shishuka uvacha tatra bhagavata sakshad yagya lingasya vishnor vikramatovama padangushta naka nirbinor dvanda kataha vivarenanta pravishtaya bhaya jaladhara tach charana pankajavane janaruna kinjalko paranjita kila jagad aga Malapahopaspаршана Mala Sakshat Bhagavat Paditi Anupalakshita Vacho Vidyamanati Mahata Kalena Yuga Sahasropalakshanena Divo Murdani Avatara Yattad Vishnu Padam Ahu. Let's do this word for word. Shishuka Uvacha. Shishukadeva Goswami said, Tatra, at that time, Bhagavataha, of the incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sakshat, directly. Yagya Lingasya, the enjoyer of the results of all sacrifices. Vishnu, O Lord Vishnu. Vikramata, while taking his second step. Vamapada, of his left leg. Angushta, of the big toe. Naka, by the nail. Nirbana, pierced. Urdhva, upper. Anda Kataha, the covering of the universe, consisting of 7 layers, earth, water, fire, etc. Vivarena, through the hole. Antapavrishta, having entered the universe. Ya, which. Bahya Jaladhara, the flow of water from the causal ocean outside the universe. Tat, of him. Charana Pankaja, of the lotus feet. Avanejana, by the washing. Aruna Kinjalka, by reddish powder. Uparanjita, being colored. Akila Jagat, of the whole world. Agamala, the sinful activities. Apaha, destroys. Usparshana, the touching of which. Amala, completely pure. Sakshat, directly. Bhagavat Padi, emanating from the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Iti, thus, Anupalakshita, described. Vachaha, by the name. Abhidhyamana, being called. Ati Mahata Kalina, after a long time. Yuga Sahasra Upalakshanena, consisting of 1,000 millenniums. Divaha, of the sky. Murdani, on the head, Dhruvaloka. Avatatara, descended. Yet, which. Tat, that. Vishnu Padam, the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu. Ahuhu, they call. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Shukadeva Goswami said, My dear King, Lord Vishnu, the enjoyer of all sacrifices, appeared as Vamanadev in the sacrificial arena of Bali Maharaj. Then he extended his left foot to the end of the universe and pierced a hole in its covering with the nail of his big toe. Through the hole, the pure water of the causal ocean entered this universe as the Ganges River. Having washed the lotus feet of the Lord, which are covered with reddish powder, the water of the Ganges acquired a very beautiful pink color. Every living being can immediately purify his mind of material contamination by touching the transcendental water of the Ganges, yet its waters remain ever pure, because the Ganges directly touches the lotus feet of the Lord. Before descending within this universe, she is known as Vishnu Padi. Later, she received other names like Janavi and Bhagirati. After 1000 millenniums, the water of the Ganges descended on Dhruvaloka, the topmost planet in this universe. Therefore, all learned sages and scholars proclaim Dhruvaloka to be Vishnupad, situated on Lord Vishnu's lotus feet. Purport. In this verse, Shukadeva Goswami describes the glories of the Ganges river. The water of the Ganges is called Patita Pavani, the deliverer of all sinful living beings. It is proven fact that a person who regularly bathes in the Ganges is purified both externally and internally. Externally, his body becomes immune to all kinds of disease, and internally, he gradually develops a devotional attitude toward the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Throughout India, many thousands of people live on the banks of the Ganges, and by regularly bathing in her waters, they are undoubtedly being purified both spiritually and materially. Many sages, including Shankaracharya, have composed prayers in praise of the Ganges, and the land of India itself has become glorious because such rivers as the Ganges, Yamuna, Godavari, Kaveri, Krishna, and Narmada flow there. Anyone living on the land adjacent to these rivers is naturally advanced in spiritual consciousness. Srila Madhvacharya says, Varahe Vama Padam tu Tad Anyeshu tu Dakshinam Padam Kalpeshu Bhagavan Ujahara Trivikramaha. Standing on his right foot and extending his left to the edge of the universe, Lord Vamana became known as Trivikrama, the incarnation who performed three heroic deeds. ॐ ज्ञानतिमिरन्दस्य ज्ञानञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरुं वैष्णवंश्च श्रीरूपं सग्रजातं सहगना रघुनाथं वितं तं सजीवं सद्वैतं सवधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपदान् सहगना ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्ण करुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धु जगत्पते गोपीश गोपिकान्त राधाकान्त नमोऽस्तुते तप्त कंचना गौरंगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वंशकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैता गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे मुखं करोति वचलं पंगुं लंघयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरुं दीनतारिणम्. So the translation again. Shukadeva Goswami said, My dear king, Lord Vishnu, the enjoyer of all sacrifices, appeared as Vamanadev in the sacrificial arena of Bali Maharaj. Then he extended his left foot to the end of the universe and pierced a hole in its covering with the nail of his big toe. Through the hole, the pure water of the causal ocean entered this universe as the Ganges river. Having washed the lotus feet of the Lord, which are covered with reddish powder, the water of the Ganges acquired a very beautiful pink color. Every living being can immediately purify his mind of material contamination by touching the transcendental water of the Ganges. Yet its waters remain ever pure. because the Ganges directly touches the lotus feet of the Lord before descending within this universe. She is known as Vishnupadi. Later she received other names like Janavi and Bhagirati. After 1000 millenniums, the water of the Ganges descended on Dhruvaloka, the topmost planet in this universe. Therefore, all learned sages and scholars proclaim Dhruvaloka to be Vishnupada, situated on Lord Vishnu's lotus feet. So, three-quarters of this entire creation are in a spiritual world, and one quarter is in the material world. So, this material side of this of entire creation, it's like a cloud. In the spiritual world, everything is illuminated in all directions, but there is this space it looks like a cloud, like a dark cloud. So this is where material existence is. It is like a playground for the living entities to enjoy their material desires. Those forgotten Krishna, put love of Krishna aside, then Krishna, to fulfill their material desires for enjoyment, he creates this playground of material world. And in that cloud, one expansion of Krishna lays in a causal ocean. And that area becomes filled with what is considered a water that comes from perspiration of Mahavishnu. So now Mahavishnu expands, and from his pores, unlimited universes come out, and he enters in each and every universe. So river Ganges is considered that water from causal ocean. In one of the incarnations of the Lord as Trivikrama, Lord makes a little hole in the universe, because universe is considered like a nut. It's all covered. That's why it is a dark. That's why we don't see the light of the spiritual world here, because it's like a nut or an egg. And there's different descriptions given in the Vedic literature. And there are innumerable universes. Is described if you take a big bag, like a sack of potatoes. How many are potatoes in a sack? It's quite a few. But if you put in the sack of potatoes mustard seeds, it will be a lot more. So sometimes it's described that there are so many universes as there are mustard seeds in a sack. So it's quite a few. So then we are in one of those universes, and in this one specific incarnation, when the Lord makes a little hole in the universe, then this water of Ganges starts coming through. And because that Ganges touched the lotus feet of the Lord, is considered supremely pure. It's quite mystical, because anything what touches the feet, generally we touch our feet to the floor, and the floor, even if you cleaned it, a few minutes ago, as soon as you finish the cleaning, it starts becoming dirty because there are dust particles in the air. Actually, most of dust particles are coming from our skin. And also people come in from outside. So no matter if you just clean it, it's immediately starting to get dirty. And when you walk with the feet, all those little particles, they get attached to your feet. And you start taking it out, start spreading around in different parts of where you live. So therefore, cleaning has to go on. You can't just clean once and say, okay, that's once and for all we cleaned it, and you don't need to do it anymore. Just like we were working with Yvette over last couple of days of creating like this cleaning checklist, and you have like a daily cleaning task, weekly cleaning tasks, and it has to be checked that it has been cleaned. So quickly things become dirty, This material world is always a struggle and endeavor to keep things clean. And when things are clean is considered, then its mode of goodness enters. And when there is mode of goodness, it's just a one step to transcendence. So if it's clean around us and our consciousness is pure, then the spiritual world becomes manifest. It's very powerful spiritual energy called Vaikunta. Kunta means anxiety. Vai there means no. So Vaikunta means no anxiety. However, the Lord, everything about the Lord is pure. Even the feet, everything that touches with the Lord's feet is considered pure. And therefore, often his feet is considered lotus feet. Lotus has got this amazing propensity that when it is in the water, it's simultaneously, because of its waxing surface or wax surface, is simultaneously in the water and not in the water. So if you lift out the lotus flower from the river or the water, all the water drips away from it because of the wax, and then it becomes dry very quickly. So the Lord is considered many reasons, of course, why this feet is considered lotus feet. But one of the reasons is that he's not touched by this material energy. It is his energy, but he never influenced by this material energy and the various not such a wonderful things that comes with the material energy and that material contamination, as we discussed the other day. So many things that come from material contamination when the living entity enters it: lust, anger, greed, envy, illusion, madness, etc. So this river Ganges, because it touches the lotus feet of the Lord, it travels, is described in the universe in some mystical way. It doesn't travel exactly in the same way as we can see the rivers are flowing in this material world, because things are a lot more subtle in the higher realms. Like here, we can touch the water and get wet, but in the higher realms, everything is more and more subtle, and even the water, as we discussed the other day, is considered a subtle material energy, one of the material elements. But of course, being in touch with the Lord, it has a completely different quality. It doesn't have any more material quality, but it has transcendental quality. So the nature of transcendence is that it purifies and cleanses. So in due course of time, this Ganges, after entering the material world, it reaches this planet. Uh, and it starts from Himalayas, and it's called Gangotri, the place where Lord Ganges emanates from Himalayas. So, because of that nature of purity, the river Ganges has got a purifying effect. And it's actually, some scientists even researched it, that something about the Ganges, that it has, although it's one of the most polluted rivers, I guess, in the world, considering the how India has got this kind of industrial explosion, over, with over a few decades. The industrial explosion happened in this part of the world a while ago when we polluted all the rivers, and it's kind of, there is now effort to try to cleanse it and make things better and change the way how we do industry. But in India, it's kind of peak of it almost. It's almost a peak of the industry. So everything, all the dirt and the sewage, absolutely everything goes into the Ganges. But somehow another, it seems, and there's scientists actually check that water. That seems that on material level, even it has a healthy effect. Of course, Anyway, I don't get into the details, but it has that health effect that is described here, that people since time immemorial used to live next to Ganges and other holy rivers and take bath in there. So by taking bath in the river Ganges, it has effect on a physical platform that one becomes healthier, and on top of that, and more importantly, it has effect on a subtle platform to actually purify us from reactions from our past activities. And I had a personal experience as well. And those who, how many people has bathed in the Ganges here? Got two people, and Brenda Matage as well. And how many people bathe in the Yamuna? It's also two or three. So my experience was bathing in a Ganges and Yamuna. When you come out of it, it feels like a big weight from the shoulders. You don't realize actually what kind of weight of reactions we are carrying on our consciousness until that weight becomes released to some extent. When I entered teenage years, and before, it was a good few years, maybe 8, 9 years before I started practicing spiritual life, I started to kind of catching up with the material world, just doing all sorts of activities that degraded actually my consciousness. And I was wondering at one point, where is this youthful joy has gone from my life? Because when you look into like a people who are like a 10, 11, and 12, 13, before they enter puberty and whatever comes with all that, they seem to be like this innocent purity and joy and all that kind of thing. And sometimes as well I go to distribute books at the university as well. You meet those young people, freshers, they called freshers, and they look quite fresh actually at that point. Bright faced and fresh, at least some of them, or quite a few of them. And then you meet them a year later, they completely, the complexion gets dark. They got like this blue thing under the eyes. Is often looks like a day and night. Anybody had that experience? I had experience in my own life. And then, so often it's difficult to understand because you're doing what everybody does. You're living the so-called normal life, but actually you don't realize what effect it has on your consciousness. So I just was wondering, what happened? I just couldn't understand. I just living like a normal human being, just doing the things that normal people do, and why I'm feeling like something has changed in my life. Why I need now to get intoxicated to feel, good or have a good time. Where is this natural, when you wake up and you feel just happy naturally, where this is gone? I just was kind of pondering and wondering what what happened. And when, then a good few years later, actually, of course, that change of consciousness and the misery that come with it inspired me to take to spiritual life. And then when the spiritual life started to purify my existence, then again I started to experience this natural positivity and joy that comes from purified existence. So this is what happens to us. Those various karmic reactions creates like a weight on the shoulders, and I started to feel lighter, and start to experience actually how much weight I was carrying. Sometimes, people go as well, not necessarily who take to spiritual life, but they go through a lot of suffering and misery, or taking to some meditation, or changing a lifestyle, or even changing the diet. You will find, a lot of people describing. I read, some of the experiences that vegan people, for example, have by stopping eating meat. A lot of them share like they're starting to feel lighter and brighter, and their complexion changes, and often the like a look even with negativity to the people who continue the lifestyle they used to live, and they call those people meat eaters. And that kind of thing. And of course, when your consciousness becomes more uplifted, then you as well, there is a transition period that when you're trying, you just feel angry almost at all that life that you used to live yourself, and you almost like a pointing like with a finger with all those people, but that continue with that self-destructing lifestyle, whether it's intoxication, whether it's meat eating, or all sorts of other things. But as your consciousness further becomes purified, then you may start looking at these people with compassion rather than thinking, I'm the superior, now I'm like I'm much better than all of you. My diet is better, I'm looking better, and my conscience is doesn't have any guilt. So instead of like a feeling that superiority complex of being saved, you may start feeling compassion and starting to think, is there any ways I could help those people as well to experiencing what I am experiencing? So this is, signs of purified consciousness. So there is obvious that even we can experience in material life by changing our ways of thinking, by changing our lifestyle, by changing our diet, by changing our attitudes, that actually we experience a certain freedom and change of consciousness and freedom from karmic reactions. And it's considered that transcendental knowledge is something very, very powerful. In the fourth chapter of Bhagavad Gita is described that transcendental knowledge can also purify us, and everything that is in relationship with the Supreme Lord, transcendental knowledge, the water that is emanating from His lotus feet or touch His lotus feet, His holy names, His pastimes, His qualities, everything in relationship with Krishna is purifying and uplifting our consciousness. Because the nature of just a material purification, whether we're going to change the diet, whether we're going to become a good person, and etc., it still remains on material platform, and the tendency still remains to become drawn to impure things. Uh, in this life, you may become, change your diet, but who knows what other things we can do, because there is so many other things that we are not even aware of because of the influence of modern world. We may change the diet, but there are some other things that we do can degrade our consciousness. For example, intoxication. So we may become, because there are, for example, vegan pubs. You can go to the vegan pub. So on one hand, you uplifted your consciousness by changing your diet, but on the other hand, you go there and you bring your consciousness down by intoxication. So it's like a pulling into two different directions. And there are so many other things, and that's why we need to study transcendental knowledge to understand what is uplifting and what is degrading to our consciousness. Our consciousness is like a garden, we said another time, and sometimes also consciousness can be compared with a liquid. So if you put the black stuff in a liquid, then it's gonna take the quality of darkness. If you put a red stuff, it becomes red. If you put like what is this name, pinkish, because the lotus feet of the Lord is pinkish. The um, uh, Ganges is described in its pure form, is got a pinkish color. So our consciousness acquires various types of colors, and then instead of seeing things in a pure way that the residents of spiritual world see, we can see through the various kinds of coloring: green, black, yellow, red, blue. So we don't see things as they are, but we start to see things as we are. Whatever color our consciousness has acquired, and there is a different also colorings described in the Vedic literature and the Gita. the mode of darkness, mode of ignorance. If we live and act and behave and eat in the mode of darkness, our consciousness acquires the color of darkness. And that's, you can look in 14th chapter and 18th chapter is described the various symptoms of that consciousness by living in a certain way: misery, laziness, moroseness, harshness, becomes manifest in our consciousness as a coloring, because we live in a certain way, because of the choices that we make. So we can't really blame anybody else. Actually, because of our choices, we reach that consciousness, and we can change it by our own individual decisions that we make in our life. Or we can take a color for our consciousness of red or passion, that we become obsessed by greed and hankering and various types of sensual pleasures and gratifications and aspirations for more and more and more and more. So that's also certain choices, certain desires will color our consciousness in that particular way. And then the mode of goodness is illuminating. One is becoming detached, one is becoming dutiful, one is prepared to perform some sacrifices for a higher cause, for other people, for other entities. One's consciousness becomes filled with compassion and kindness and punctuality and cleanliness and, and other things. I'm not referring to anybody. It's just whatever came out, whatever is the description. Again, you can read in Bhagavad Gita, 14th chapter, and you can actually, we are doing actually classes on Bhagavad Gita every day that Ashish Prabhu is facilitating. And are you about to enter 13th chapter?
Yes.
It's about entering 13th chapter. So in a week or two times, there's going to be 14th chapter, which specifically speaks about various types of colorings of our consciousness that we can acquire by our choices, thoughts, desires, and activities. And we can learn as well how to raise and purify and uplift our consciousness. So we have to embrace when we taste, and it's also this various types of coloring of consciousness brings us various types of happiness. We experience happiness in a mode of darkness through like a being harsh to other people, or sleeping all day, or or all sorts of things that are mentioned again in the 14th chapter that you can attend in a week or two times in Ashisha's class and explore it a little bit deeper. And also happiness in a mode of passion as well. In the beginning is like a nectar. When your senses are touching the sense object, whichever the sense could be, eyes, tongue, belly, all sorts of genitals, you can experience happiness in a mode of passion. But when there is an absence of that experience, one becomes very, very attached. And when there is an absence, it turns into misery. To the degree we experience sensual pleasure, to the very same degree we feel misery in the absence of that sensual object. So it's not the way to go for the happiness. And often the people who go through all those, when one becomes removed from that sensual experience due to some karma, one starts experiencing a lot of misery, and there is a tendency to go to the darkness and become depressed and discouraged and angry and burnt out. So you can see this is not the way of happiness. So the scriptures are inspiring us to go for a higher happiness, for happiness in the mode of goodness. And even that happiness is not considered the highest and the goal. The highest happiness is transcendental happiness. So therefore, the scriptures and the sages and spiritual masters are calling us, wake up from this happiness in darkness, wake up from happiness in passion. There is so much more happiness, or there's unlimited happiness in a transcendental sattva. Vishuddha sattva is calling us, inviting us to experience it. And one of the ways, of course, is this river Ganges, because it's coming emanating from the lotus feet of the Lord. You can actually become purified by taking bath. But my experience as well, that even I bathe in the Yamuna and in Ganges, you feel this big relief. It's just like amazing experience actually to feel that sudden relief of a burden of various types of colors on your consciousness. However, the next day it seems like you're back to normal. So it's described that one has to bathe over prolonged period of time in this river Ganges or Yamuna, until the consciousness becomes properly purified on a deep level. Because there's a surface level of our consciousness, and there's a deep, many layers of subconsciousness of many births, many lives, many impressions that accumulated there in the depths of our consciousness. So if the surface get cleaned, that's very nice. But what about all the darkness deep under? So it's described that it takes many, long period of time to purify that. However, there is another types of rivers. There's another types of rivers that one can bathe in. It's a river of grace coming from the Lord, in the form of the holy name of the Lord. That is considered Golakera Premadana Harinama Sankirtana. This river, sometimes the holy name is also considered as a river or even an ocean. One can bathe in the ocean of the holy name or in a river of the holy name every day. We are doing, of course, in the temple here between 5:15 until 7, but you can do it any time and anywhere. But morning time is the mood of goodness, when the bath is very much desirable, because when we wake up, we take a bath on a physical level. But what about our consciousness? Is our consciousness, as Adakshiji Prabhu was saying the other day, our consciousness can have a smell. Have you ever experienced an angry person in the room? You can almost smell it. That anger. You can feel that anger. So it's described that our various conceptions of life are sometimes travels like a ear passes, through the various places. Our consciousness, if it's passing in association of um, dirty things, when the ear passes above the garbage or above this field of stool, it acquires the smell of a stool. When our consciousness is passing above the field of flowers, it acquires and picks up the smell of a flower. So by our choices, we can choose to not only chant the holy name of the Lord, but also associate with people who are also in elevated consciousness. Because Sangat Sanjayate Kama, whatever you associate, that you acquire. So if our consciousness passes in associates with the people with elevated consciousness, then that will raise our consciousness, that will plant the beautiful seeds and colors in our consciousness of devotion, uh, that our consciousness can become like a beautiful lotus, a garden of lotus flowers. And you can see when you meet a person with elevated consciousness, it uplifts you. And even when we associate with people who are angry or passionate, we acquire those qualities. But when we associate with people in a mode of goodness or in transcendence or in a between aspiring for transcendence, that actually also inspires us and uplifts our consciousness. So therefore there is another verse in Srimad Bhagavatam that says that by a moment's association with a pure devotee, it can immediately purify us and change our conception of life. In a very short amount of time, our aspirations can become uplifted and upgraded from the modes of ignorance, from the modes of passion, into mode of goodness. And actually we can start even aspiring for transcendence by that association. So it's described that the river of Ganges can purify us in a long amount of time, but association with a saintly person can purify and uplift us in a very short amount of time. So this is the power of association in a river of a holy person, or association of the river of association. So we have to choose which rivers we take bath every day. Do you want to take a bath in the river of anger, or do you want to bathe in the river of pride, thinking I am better than everybody else? The saintly people are considering this river like a urine. It says, "Do you want to bathe in a urine in a of ass called pride?" Sorry for being very graphic, but sometimes the language is used to shake us a little bit up, to give us understanding that how contaminating it is. You know, when we think about the urine of ass, it doesn't sound very pleasurable to bathe that kind of thing. But when I'm thinking, oh, I'm the best in my village, I'm the best in my village, it's compared to that consciousness is compared to the same the contaminating effect it has. It's compared in the same way. Or when somebody pokes us on the side, which kind of river do you want to open? As we were attending this Mahatma Prabhu's class, and there was this, you were showing this picture of the heart. Usually heart is like this. Or how do people do it? Can't remember now. When you touch in the wrong way, there is one river from the heart can open when it's just like a garbage. Who do you think you are? Why you just touch me? Why you just touch me in this wrong way? Why are you looking at me like this? Sometimes you get things. I've been, I don't know whether it happens in UK, but in my town where I was studying, sometimes people say like that, who do you think who do you think you are? Why do you looking like this? And sometimes they get into fight, they get drunk, and just because somebody looked as they fought in the wrong way, they get into fight. So which river do you want to open in our heart when somebody pokes us? The river of forgiveness or compassion or kindness, or the river of anger, envy, and all sorts of things? What kind of river is going to come out from your mouth? The river of appreciation, or some nasty, filthy language, or river of forgiveness? So this is our choice. So are there any questions or comments on this?
Yeah,
Yes.
silly question.
Yes.
So if we bathe in the Ganges, even though it's externally polluted, we won't get sick.
They drink it, and then they should be okay. People have even such a faith, and that they would even drink it despite of the pollution, and they don't get sick. So there is also your level of consciousness. If you have this absolute faith, uh, you know, but I don't recommend to do it unless you just like on a transcendental platform completely. Then you may drink it and nothing will happen to you. Uh, but generally, you would not do it. So there's any other quick question or comment? Yes, we.
It's a bit late,
Yes.
it's just that these students are when they start fresh, and they have some ideals, and then that's ground down to be realistic. That's why I found that maybe because you're trying to take part now in an economic system, you need to find something that will be useful to other people. They'll use you to generate income, and then you'll get a percentage of that. So you happen to kind of recalibrate the whole paradigm that you had about what you're going to do with your life and how you're going to contribute to society, to what's going to be financially viable. And so it's a shame that they're very expert at doing that. Sort of by the time they turn them out, they're just really keen to acquire money, which basically means you're taking Brahmins and reducing them to Shudras, which is not a process of education. It's supposed to elevate people, isn't it? Not to break them down to something, where the Prabhupada compared it to being like a dog running around trying to get someone to give him a bone. So the Shuddha is just, will you pay me, will you pay me, rather than real education is the person who has to sustain himself, standing on 2 feet. So the Brahmins are able to live in a very independent society.
Yes. Yes, that's
I wanted so much to establish self-sufficient communities, and also, do education with young generation. Of course, even late beginner can do really well, no doubt. But it's a bit easier to make changes when you're young, and adjust your lifestyle and values and etc. Because you're like a very fresh still and keen to, and very idealistic as well. Because there's a tendency to become very cynical in due course of time when you experience the nature of this world. So very young, it's easier to make those changes. Um, so yes, it's a very good point. Thank you. Do you have something quick? But it will be 1 minute answer.
just regarding this lifestyle. Thank you very much for describing the choices and the sacred room, and that creates illumination by which you see things clearly. And one thing I find very helpful is one instruction I heard from Swami Shivaram Swami, where he says, he was specifically referring to chanting. He says that the taste is in the endeavor, meaning that the taste is in the endeavor to make the right choice. And so when we're endeavoring to give up the modes of activities in the mode of passion and ignorance, then we do need some taste. It's described as being poison in the beginning, but during that stage of poison, we need some taste before we come to the right stability. So just offer that this is one taste we can obtain, is the taste that we derive from actually appreciating that we can make the right choice. It's not that we need to get proud, because you need to make that choice at every moment. If you relax and think, oh, I've made the right choice, then you've become proud, and then you've made the wrong choice to be proud. So it's like a constant endeavor. So it's a constant taste there. And I just wanted to offer that as like a little realization that I've had.
Nice. Yeah, that's a very, very good point. The ability to make choices, and the right choices or enlightened choices, comes from power of discrimination. And the power of discrimination comes from two things: association and studying scripture. If we regularly every day study and enlighten ourselves with scripture and hear with saintly people, then our intelligence becomes activated to make right choices in our life. And also taking opportunities, like we're going to have a retreat here at the end of the month, where the whole weekend is dedicated to hearing and chanting and uplifting. That's very, very powerful way to energize one's Krishna consciousness. And as we said earlier, that's the most powerful way of association, is to associate with saintly people. That activates our intelligence and gives that higher taste. And then after that, when there is a presentations given through the senses or through various kind of karmic results in our life, then we can make enlightened choices, because the intelligence is functioning properly, and we have to still carry on reading every day. And also we experiencing a higher taste that we gained in association of saintly people. And therefore it is also very, very high responsibility for us, because the purpose of visiting holy place is to meet holy people who can transform your consciousness. So it's a very great responsibility of those people who live in the holy places, is to keep their consciousness elevated and pure, so that when people who come here, they meet elevated consciousness, that they meet saintly people, not just dressed as a saintly people, but actually in a person's in a consciousness of a saintly person, in a purified consciousness. There's a great responsibility for us to keep the holy place as holy by the consciousness of the residents who live in there. And therefore, this very, very high emphasis Prabhupada gave to us of hearing and chanting with a high quality and studying the scripture so that people can uh, gain that strength when they come, overwhelmed with various bad habits, addictions, attachments, miseries, lower modes of nature. That that all becomes elevated, becoming in touch with saintly people. So stop here. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Nitai Gaura Premanande.